Hey moms, it's Laura Ollinger. Welcome to the Positively Healthy Mom podcast. Because there's no manual for the hardest job in the world.
Hi, Dana. It's so nice to be with you today. And so I want to introduce you to the Positively Healthy Mom listeners. And so today we've got Dana Diaz. And Dana, let's start just right away with the topic that you are an expert in and the book that you've written.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for having me, by the way. Unfortunately, I have become an expert in narcissistic abuse because I was born to a mother and then who married a man who still is the king of all narcissists. And so I grew up in a household with two parents that mistreated me and I saw narcissistic behavior, but I was a kid. I didn't know what it was. But lo and behold, when I left that house thinking I was escaping mistreatment altogether, I fell into the arms and the lair of another abusive narcissist. And so my first book, Gasping for Air, The Stranglehold of Narcissistic Abuse, delves into that 25-year relationship with my ex-husband. And obviously, I just gave away the end of the book by revealing that he is the ex-husband. But I think it's important to talk about because it affects so many layers of life. And I'll say this very briefly for people that aren't familiar with narcissistic abuse. All it is when a narcissist abuses you. Are all narcissists abusive? No, there are some I love very much. But the narcissists that abuse you will use any and all tactics to get to you. So it's not just verbal abuse or physical abuse. I mean, there's financial, sexual, legal, there's manipulation and the gaslighting and all this stuff. But the problem is that it's not like something happens and then you get over it and life goes on. It's coming at you multiple times a day, every day, 24/7 until it's just another Tuesday for how many years? And the impact it had on me by the end of that 25 years was that it caused me lung disease. I didn't even realize that cortisol, the stress hormone, can actually impact your health. So it made me autoimmune and gave me this lung disease that I will now live with the rest of my life. And that's why you hear this scratchiness in my throat when I talk. So, talking about mothering in the midst of that chaos, that's a whole other aspect that I don't get to speak about much. And I delve into it a little bit in the book, but it certainly can affect anybody. It can affect men and women. So this is certainly for any parent to relate to or connect with and, maybe learn a little something from. So again, thank you so much for having me.
Yes, absolutely. And so that's where, because our listeners are moms, that's where I really want to spend the majority of our time today. I mean, it feels like everywhere I turn, I keep hearing friends' stories, friends of a friend or whatever, that it seems like it's happening a lot these days. I don't know if there's just more narcissists or more people are talking about it. Like, I don't know how this is like growing exponentially, but I think it's like this awareness that now we're having this understanding that this type of abusive behavior, the gaslighting, the manipulation, all the other types that you named, maybe it's just more that people are talking about it and moms are coming together, or women in general are coming together and say, hey, my husband or my ex-husband is treating me like this. And then they're kind of coming to the understanding like, wait a second, this isn't normal. This isn't healthy. It's kind of so, I think, helpful when people come together in community and really just start to share and talk about it. So that is why I wanted to bring you on today. And so what do you feel like you could offer as, even for the very kind of novice beginner narcissist person? I just met someone recently who is being abused, and I said, oh, it sounds like your ex-husband's a narcissist. And she's like, oh, yeah, someone else said that. Like, it's like she didn't even really know that that's what had been happening. So let's just start there at the very beginning for those people. So how do you define narcissistic abuse?
Well, again, it's when a narcissist abuses you, but the way I explain it is this, because the term narcissist is used so loosely. If somebody's mean to you, if he's a narcissist or that's not the way it is. Narcissist actually comes from the name of the Greek god Narcissus, who liked to look at his reflection in the water because he was so handsome. But that, and we see those people on social media. They've got the abs or they got the body or whatever, and they might annoy us because they really are as good looking as they think they are, but they're not bothering anybody with it. But the narcissists that we're talking about, and this is why I explain it this way, it's like tumors, because there's kind of a spectrum. Like on the one hand, you can have a benign tumor in your body. Those are those people with the abs or the lashes or the hair, whatever, that it's there. It's not bothering you, though. We love some of them. Some of them we just stay away from because, whatever. But the other ones are those malignant tumors. They're going to bother you. They're going to hurt you. They might even kill you. I mean, the reality is, I mean, as women, and I can speak freely because this is a mom podcast. I'm not picking on men, though. Let me make that clear. But women, 38% of women between the ages of 19 and 24 years old experience their first abusive relationship in their life. 38%, that's a lot. And 1 out of 3 women, all women, are in some kind of an abusive relationship in their life. And then take that one step further, that over 20% of the male prison population in the US are considered narcissists. I would argue that it's more. And then let's add one more layer of that, if I'm not scaring anybody already, that same 38% of all women murdered everywhere, 38% are killed by their spouse or intimate partner. That's scary. So, when you add to that women are mothers, what happens to the kids?
Right. That's a great question. And so, I've always heard that you marry either your mother or your father. And, if you are married to a narcissist, that chances are you'll end up either becoming a narcissist yourself or marrying a narcissist. And so that's also why I'm really passionate about this topic, because, I think you're feeling the same way, where we just want to stop this cycle. Like we want to stop this generational trauma from like trickling down and continuing. And so I think like having this awareness and like developing some healing with everybody, that can slow it. I know that's like a big grand vision for us to have, but we can start somewhere. And this is where we have to start, by talking about it, sharing stories. And so how, as a mother, were you able to still be a mother? It sounds like you have an amazing 21-year-old son who's just thriving. And so how were you able to cope during those difficult years?
Well, I'm not sure. It was awful, because the problem is I was trying to just, I mean, I always said it was like trying to keep my head above water every day, just to breathe and to keep putting one foot in front of the other, while my soul was just dying, and I didn't even want to live sometimes. I mean, there were several moments where I just didn't want to be anymore. But my son is what kept me going, because there was no way in hell that I was going to leave him and leave him to be raised by that. Because the scary thing is exactly what you just said. One of my greatest fears, and it still is, it's always in the back of my head, please don't let my son be like his dad. But the sad thing is that, I remember even when he was a year old in his high chair, he would see things, hear things, things would get thrown. I'd be called names. All these things were happening, and he didn't know. He was oblivious. He didn't understand. But children, you got to give them a little more credit, because they're still absorbing the tension. They're absorbing the facial expressions. They can see the fear. They can see the sadness. And the one thing, like I always remember, I would hide in this little corner of my kitchen if he was amused with a snack. And, he used to love watching Baby Neptune. I'd have that video on replay. But I would just get in fetal position in the corner of the kitchen, several feet away from him. He was right there, but I didn't want him to see me crying. But sometimes I just had to hide my face and just get it out and release it. Because, Narcissist 101 is they isolate you. They don't like your family. They don't like your friends. Next thing you know, it's just easier not to have any family or friends than to fight about it, or to face the hindrances of seeing those people. So it's like I was alone with this baby, and he was depending on me. And so I just had to learn how to take those moments for myself and give myself permission. As he got older, it was, maybe when he was having lunch or whatever, or if he was, playing with his Hot Wheels, okay, I got to excuse myself to go to the restroom. He was right there in the next room. I could hear him. It's not like I was leaving him, but sometimes I just needed to go close the door and just, breathe or cringe or whatever it was that I needed to do. And when he napped, I had to learn to meditate or just do some yoga, or just, it's almost like trying to find those tiny little moments to have that little bit of self-care just to get you through to the next time. And that's basically how I got through. Is it healthy? Probably not. It would have been healthier not to be in an abusive, situation. But I was there because I thought I was doing the noble thing. I thought that I had this baby with this man. It was right to stay married, and I shouldn't get divorced, and I should keep the family together because that's what you do. You stick it out. But, looking back, I can never convince anybody, and I would never want to convince anybody one way or another. But looking back, I wish I would have, because I stuck it out 25 years thinking I was going to stay married to this man forever, no matter what. But as you said, it's a generational thing, because my grandma was married to a narcissist. Obviously, my mother's married to a narcissist. I could tell a million stories about them, so it just goes on, and you see the pattern, and you're told just to stay. When my ex was, cheating on me, how many times, my mother was telling me, well, but you married him. So, and everybody is just saying, shh, we don't talk about that stuff. But what I notice about, I'm Generation X, but I think my generation and younger, we are being raised in a different time where women do have rights. Because I don't even know, a lot of people don't even know that. I was born in 1975. Even in my lifetime, you could not, as a married woman, file charges against your husband for beating you or for
Really?
doing, really. It
Oh,
was
wow.
against the law. So I think now that laws are changing and women have, are getting more rights, and women are, being praised for being brave and speaking out, I think that we're going to hopefully eliminate this incidence. Because where I see, to speak to what you said before, mom and grandma, great, everybody was saying, shh, we don't talk about that. Yes, we know it happens, but don't say that out loud. Whereas our generation's like, tides are turning. We're going to call crap like we see it, and we're not going to stand for this for us or for our kids. So hopefully our kids are going to take what they've seen us do and the stance we're taking against everything, and move forward, hopefully, to decrease the incidence of it at the very least.
Right. I'm so glad you brought that up, because even now there is this stigma about getting divorced, and
Oh,
there's so
yeah.
much, self-help and materials on saving your marriage,
Mm-hmm.
stay in the marriage. And it's still this, and for so many of us, it is a cultural, religious belief that we
Yes.
are trying to uphold. And so then we get the guilt on top of the abuse, so it's like we've got the abuse over
I
here, the
do
guilt over
know.
here, and then you're trapped in the middle. And so again, I would never persuade anyone to do anything,
Right.
but just to have this knowledge and this conversation that, exposing your children to abuse is causing them harm. It is causing them
Yes.
some damage. It is kind of going into their nervous system, whether they consciously remember it or not. Like you said, when he is real little, or, it does go into their nervous system. And so it's like later on in life, he might be triggered by something and he might not know why, but,
Right.
it's like he might feel that same emotion coming up again and again. And so kind of just giving women permission, if they need it, to exit an unsafe or unhealthy marriage for the sake of you and for the sake of your kids, and really being a
Yes.
leader, and kind of like carving a new path, carving a new way of being, and saying, hey, this is not okay. I hope that somehow gets through to our culture, so this doesn't continue to, happen over and over again.
100%, because that's what it is. I mean, our kids are monkey see, monkey do, or they might do, and it's not necessarily doing what they see, but doing what they didn't see. Like for me, being raised by two of these people, oh my goodness, I don't know how I came out of there not being like them, but it was because I was so resolute, even as a young little, I was a fiery and feisty little thing, but my God, it was like I did not want to be like mom. I was not going to sit back and let some man dictate every damn thing about our life, what we ate, what we wore, where we went. No, no, no. She couldn't have a singular thought to save her life because she was scared. And I saw that when I was a kid. And I said, there's no way. But then what happened? There I was. And even though I wasn't that way, if I fought, if I stood up for myself with my ex, there were consequences. And it was not that it's okay, but I took it. But when I had my kid, now it wasn't just about me. Now I have to worry about this other whole life. And was it worth it for me to take that stand against this? Or was it easier just to not wear that dress, or to not go see that friend, or to not get, whatever. I just wanted to keep the peace. So it wasn't that I was weak, and it wasn't that I was submissive. And it pisses me off when people assume that a woman who stays in that situation is, because they don't understand the fear. And when you talk about the nervous system, I mean, that's a whole other podcast we could have to talk about the effect of your body. And what really creates that trauma bond is your chemical reaction to this person. And it's all stimulated by this fear of what happens if you even think about. I mean, you're scared to even think. You're afraid to think, because if you have that thought, my gosh, they track your car, they track you, they follow you now on Ring doorbells and GPSs on your phone, and they comment and text, and they just creep into every aspect of your life till you're looking over your shoulder, wondering if you can even have your own thought. So yes, you submit, you just take stuff you wouldn't normally take because your child is more important. And you don't want them to deal with the repercussions. So if there is anybody out there that this is resonating at all and you're in that situation, I'm going to tell you right now, it takes a stronger person to stay in a situation like that every single day than a weak one. So don't ever let anyone call you weak or make you feel badly for being in that situation. But yes, if you have a safe opportunity to get out, all I can say is I like to be an example of what happens. I was terrified. I didn't think my life would, it would be better. Certainly, a little less intense, but it is so much more than that. I mean, to say I can breathe now is an understatement, and it's so freeing in so many ways. It's just so much better on the other side.
Yeah. And I was just actually talking to another friend. It seems like this has been a very common theme with me lately, who, she's a little bit older, and her husband was a raging narcissist, and he passed away. He just kind of dropped dead one day. And she said, I hate to say it, but she's like, I feel amazing. I feel like myself again. She says, I feel like I can be who I used to be, and the connection with my daughters is so much better now, because all those years it was kind of tainted and it was distorted because he was getting in the daughter's ear about, who she was. And so now they're able to kind of have more clarity about what the connection is with their mom. And so that's part of the kind of insidious nature of a narcissist, is
very.
Like the way they manipulate not just you, but the people, like your children or the people that are really close to you, to believing that you're the problem, or that you're crazy. Or
100%.
Right?
100%. And I'm going to add on to that, something that I didn't even realize until I was out of it. I was talking to a friend of mine who, had unfortunately been in not the best marriage either, and understood on levels I wish people didn't. But she said, that's the thing, is that we are wearing a mask too. They are wearing a mask. They are portraying themselves one way, but what are we doing? We are portraying ourselves differently too, to our children who are living in that house with us, to everybody else. We're smiling, going to T-ball games, pretending like everything's just wonderful. Nobody knows. But what's amazing, and my favorite moment after my ex moved out and it was just me and my son. I mean, he didn't even try to have custody of my son was still a minor technically at the time, but he didn't even try. He no financial responsibility. He didn't want any visitation, no custody. He just washed his hands of both of us. But yes, he still, of course, tried to pit my son against me. But what I loved this moment was I was free and I had a friend, as I had, for many years. People invited me here and there, and I always said no, because God forbid I went anywhere after work. I had to stay home and live my life of servitude to this man. But I went out. I was like, I'm going out to have a glass of wine with a friend. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
And my son said to me a couple days later, he's like, it's good to see you smiling again. Simple thing. He hadn't seen me. He'd seen me smiling, but they were fake smiles. I was overcompensating for all this unpleasance. I was pretending. I was wearing a mask for him mostly, but he saw through it. So when my eyes were matching my mouth and I was really actually happy and I was enjoying life, and I had the fact that I even had friends, he's like, it's really good to see you smile. And I loved that. And there were so many moments after that, though. I remember shortly after my ex moved out, everything was so regimented. There were all these unspoken rules, although my ex went so far a few times as to actually write down my rules, which yes. I have one of those lists in the book, and I still have that list. I like to refer back to it to remind me that I'm good now. But yes, he went so far as to write some rules down. But after he moved out, it was maybe the day after, I remember standing in the kitchen, like I literally, I mean, I'm college educated. I have a very high IQ. I'm very outspoken, if you haven't noticed. And I'm standing in my kitchen like, a deer in headlights. I had no idea what to do with myself, what to make for dinner, and my son was passing through and he kind of looked at me a little weird. He's like, we don't have to follow his rules anymore, Mom. I was like, oh, you're right. Like it didn't even occur to me that making my own decision about what to have for dinner even was a possibility. And you know what? He had all these rules about we couldn't have the same meat on 2 consecutive nights, and we had to have exactly 2 sides, but they couldn't both be carbs or both be protein. I mean, I had to plan. Like it was very well planned. You know what I had for dinner that night? I said, F it. I'm having a pint of butter pecan ice cream. That was the best ice cream I've ever had in my life. But I thank my son for that, because I'm standing there stunted, and it makes me so sad. I mean, for such a simple word, but to think that this, this man took, filled his ego by diminishing me and stripping me of every little bit of myself and my self-worth and my self-respect. But, the beautiful thing is when you remove that and it's not in your life anymore, the embers are still there. It starts flaring up if you give it some, fuel, and you get yourself back. It takes some time, but it just feels so good, because nobody likes, that gut feeling we get, or even those stomach aches, because I don't know, stomach aches and headaches were a big thing with me my whole life. That's all because your body is telling you something's not right. That is like your mental and physical well-being screaming, like the alert. It's like the smoke detector going off saying, hello, energy's not right around here. And we have to start listening to that, because now that I'm out of that, it's been 3.5 years, and it's amazing how far I've come, even just healing as a human being. I've had so many people say, you're so different now. And I'm like, but the thing is, I was different then. This is who I am. And I don't have all those medical issues, and I'm healthy, much healthier mentally, physically. It all comes full circle. And so it's hard for me to see people that are still in that situation. But I also remember being one of those people who it took me 15 years from the time I first decided I couldn't be with this man to actually divorce him. 15 years of my life. And that makes me very sad too, because I don't want to see anybody waste that amount of time, because life is precious, and we don't need to feel that way and be in that situation for that long.
Right. And maybe, yeah. Okay, so my next question, you already started to answer a little bit, but how did you start to build your self-esteem?
It started with literally with my son saying that we don't have to follow the rules anymore, and giving it goes back to that permission, because I'm going to dare to say this, but I had to kind of realize, in order to leave my ex, that I had always thought he was the one holding me down and holding me back. But I was giving him, basically giving him the leash tied to the collar around my neck. It was when I decided to unhook it that life started to change. So it was just giving myself permission to have that pint of ice cream for dinner. Then after that, giving myself permission to wear that lipstick that I really liked, but that he didn't like me wearing because he said I looked like a whore. It was giving myself permission to go enjoy a glass of wine after work with a friend, because he would have never let me do that, because he would have accused me of sleeping with somebody. I couldn't even buy cat food without, him thinking I was going somewhere doing something else. So it's just, for me, what helped was just indulging those little things. Whatever you want, do it. Whatever you feel, do it. And I think at first I felt selfish, because we tend to feel like, oh, I can't do for me. But what I noticed, and it was reiterated in my son's, encouragements to me, was that me taking care of me and me living my life and filling my soul, with those little deposits into my happy jar, was making me a better person, therefore a better mother to him. And he was also seeing what resilience looks like. And he was also seeing me, be this warrior instead of this, sad little flower in the garden that wasn't getting any attention or nourishment. He was seeing me flourish. And that's what we want our kids to see. It's kind of like when you get on an airplane and they give you the whole thing before you take off, that, if something happens and the oxygen masks come down, put it on you first. And all of us mothers are like, oh, no, we put it on our child first. Right. Then you have to pick which child is your favorite, which is a whole other thing. But, the thing really is, you got to put the mask on yourself first. You have to save yourself. In turn, then you are doing your child the best favor by giving all of you to them and your best self to them.
That's kind of my philosophy, that you can kind of undo some of the damage by creating a new identity for yourself. And the stronger they see you, but in a kind, loving, empathetic way, that unconditional love that they can't get from the other parent, they know, even if they don't know what it is, they still can feel it. So they know, and again, not to gender stereotype, but in this case, we're talking about male narcissists.
Right.
They know, oh, no matter what I do, mom loves me no matter what. They know when I'm with dad, I have to behave a certain way. I have to do a certain thing. I have to walk on eggshells. We don't want to upset dad. And so even if you never, even if you never had a conversation with your child about this, they still can feel. And so the idea is, because I also heard another lady tell me one time that, the father was successful in turning her own children against her completely. And they had kind of cut her out of they were older, they were adults, but cut her out of her life. And, my philosophy is just keep being that loving, empathetic person, because 100%. It's a long game. In some of these cases, it's a longer game than others, but they will return back. They will come back, because that is what they need and that they want.
100%. And I too have a friend who has had the father turn both of their daughters completely against her. And it just breaks my heart, because as a mother, I don't think any child should be that dissociated from either parent, even if the one parent's a monster. But here's where I was at, and I agree with you 100%. And we chatted about this a little bit, was that one of the things that I did was, when my son started to get to that age where he would confront me about, well, dad said this about you. Or I remember another time, well, I saw this, you said that, dad said that. I wasn't going to get involved in that. I would just tell him, my relationship with your dad is my relationship with him. I'm not discussing the details of it with you. Because could I have shown him emails and texts and when I had to have security cameras? Oh, absolutely. He would have known his dad was a monster and a liar and a POS and everything else. But that is not my responsibility. And I would never want to take, even though my feelings for my ex obviously are pretty obvious, that is still my son's father. I would never want to be responsible for making him believe a certain way. I do believe that we all have minds. I mean, assuming we are, healthy and mentally capable of making those, judgments ourselves. A child's always going to grow up and decide what they feel on their own. I mean, just like you decide your political affiliation or anything else, you come to your own terms with things. So that wasn't my thing. I would always just tell my son, all you need to know is that I love you. And I'm a big actions speak louder than words person because, all the people who ever said they loved me in my life, including my mother and stepfather, have abused me in some way and my ex. So I'm a big follow up with actions kind of a person. When my son needed somebody, who was there? This lady, mom.
Mm-hmm. Right.
When my son was in dire straits about something or had a problem, who was there for him? Mom.
Right.
That's all he needs to know. And so every time, and even still, he has been very respectful. I think he did just turn 21. So he's gotten it since I've put this in his head for so many years. We just don't talk about his dad. It comes up once in a while because there are things sometimes that he gets certain feelings about because he still maintains his relationship with his dad. But, they still run into the same issues as always. But, he knows he can come to me and that my answer is always going to be, well, I love you. And I'm sorry you have to go through that or whatever else. But it always starts with, I love you. And I prove that to him. And, people around me see it too. When my son needs a parent, who does he go to? Mom. And that makes me sad that he doesn't have his father. But, I'm remarried now and, fortunately I've known my husband's family for 20 years. So it's not like we were strangers or anything, but, he's been amazing, to my son. And my son has other, some of his friends' dads that serve that male role model position for him. But as far as between the two parents, it's just a matter of showing them, that you love them, but reiterating that with words. I'm sorry that you were put in the middle, but I love you. That's all you need to know. And that was always my answer.
That's wonderful. I'm really curious about how you teach or have taught your son empathy. That's a topic that I'm doing a lot of research on right now and kind of investigating a lot because I work with teenagers as well as moms.
Okay.
And so been doing a lot of research about, because I deal with a lot of my clients who've been bullied, cyberbullied, they're getting a lot of just inappropriate things on social media and a lot of sexting that's just unsolicited, all these things. And so I realized kind of the baseline, the root that needs to be addressed is empathy, because that's what teenagers are just not treating each other with respect anymore. It's what I call dehumanization, just kind of treating each other as how they want to treat them, but not how they deserve to be treated. And so I was just curious, I know this wasn't really on our agenda, but what is your take on this?
I agree with you. With malignant narcissists, that is that is actually the root of malignant narcissism, is where I'm going, is empathy. They don't have any. And when you cannot conceive that another person is affected so deeply and potentially impacted for the rest of their life psychologically by the things you have said and done to them, there's a big problem. Do I think you can teach somebody to be empathetic? I think if it's a true malignant narcissist, you either are or you aren't. And I think that they are more concerned, and that's this element of selfishness that we talk about, and entitlement. They're more concerned about what they feel and how things affect them and how their life is than anybody else. And that comes before everybody and anybody, including other people, their children, etc., no matter what age they're at. As far as teaching my son, because again, yeah, when you have a narcissistic parent that is counteracting, everything that you say and do, you're panicking because you're like, I don't want my kid to be like that. And it does get scary. So my feeling, I don't know that I could teach a person empathy, but I could show him how to be empathetic. We lived on a farm. So, like when he was little, I'm a big animal person, and I don't think that's an accident. I've read studies that when you are abused as a child, like you said, you kind of become more narcissistic or you become more empathetic. And and there is a tendency to like animals and tend to them a little bit more, because you start to like people or at least distrust them a little less. So I always had an affinity for animals, and we lived on a little farm. So like we'd have like all little farm kittens. And so my son would see me from 2, 3 years old. He'd see me sometimes having to nurse the little runt of a kitten that the mom was rejecting, or, just even taking care. And he would help me, and he would help me feed the chickens and the cows and, the piglets. And I feel like that was pretty significant for him because he saw the benefit of it. He was witnessing animals and how, the one cat rejected a whole litter of kittens, but the other mama cat came in and took care of them and hers. And we were helped. I know it was sweet, but that's the thing, is that I think if you see it in nature, and with me, he was helping me, here's a little bottle. This is how you hold a kitten, and the kitten's sitting there, so I think he could see it and experience those feelings on his own, and kind of come to the conclusion that this feels really good and that I'm doing something that's impacting literally the life of this helpless little thing. And so I think that for my son was a big part of it, because to this day, I mean, it's funny, he has his own house now and his own life, and he has his living girlfriend who I adore and can't wait for them to get married. Hopefully they will one day. But she had said something recently about she wanted a kitten, and that my son said, no, we're not getting any pets yet, because they have all these plans and everything. I said, oh, but if you find one on the side of the road, honey, he will not say no. He would never, because that's the thing. He learned that empathy. He will not turn anyone away. I also believe, and I'm not saying this is a thing or pushing religion, but I also had my son attending a private Catholic school. We live in a rural area where options are limited, and I thought he would do best educationally. And I was born and raised Catholic anyway, but they run that school pretty military, but they also, one of the basic tenets of Catholicism is servitude, and you don't have to be Catholic to be, a good person. But the kids, as part of the Catholic, education, are taught from kindergarten up that they have to volunteer in the community and they have to serve as seniors. And so, I do believe that was part of helping my son learn that respect for others. And, the kids, there was nothing, I mean, it was zero tolerance, like almost to a military level, that if there was anything going on between kids, any kind of bullying or anything, there was heck to pay. And it was kind of an all for one, I mean, one day, I think his freshman year, some kids stuck a piece of gum underneath a cafeteria table, and the dean had every single kid in that entire freshman class after school with scrapers cleaning the tables and the underneath. And, it was like, well, if one screws up, they're all going to. So they learned respect and they learned discipline. And whether that was because it was a private Catholic institution or just the way it was run, I know I've seen people in the military, it's the same thing. I think it's just a matter of kids learning respect for others and for life one way or another.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, man, we could just, we could just keep going on this topic Part of what I teach in all, my presentations is the 4 styles of parenting. And so there's kind of the helicopter, there's the dismissive, there's the militant or authoritarian, and then the ideal parenting style, according to research, is authoritative, where you have boundaries and
Yes.
you have the love and the care equally kind of balanced. And that's why it actually is the hardest parenting style, even though that's the healthiest style,
Yeah.
because finding that right balance of care and love for your child, but also holding up those boundaries and that discipline
Yes.
is not easy for everyone. So I love that your son was exposed to like a really good structure growing up, and then he was able to learn respect for others. And so it sounds like he
Thank you.
had some great experiences between the farm animals and his schooling. I mean, that maybe speaks to why he turned out to be such an awesome human.
Yeah, or I just tell people I got lucky because given the situation, I mean, I joke about it, but really he should be screwed up and on drugs and be living in my basement playing video games, till he's 40, 50 years old. But no, I mean, he just turned 21. He went to school after high school graduation, went to diesel mechanic school. That was his passion. Had 5 job offers before he even graduated, took the one he wanted. And I don't believe that money is a gauge of success, but he does make a ridiculous amount of money when he was 19, taking that job and bought his first house at night. But what I am most proud of is I know he didn't come out of all that unscathed, but he has a very large group of friends that, I mean, they're like brothers. They're like a pack. Like, I know they're going to be 80 years old and still be friends. And he's very social and people like him. I mean, 80-year-old people I introduce him to and 8-year-olds just love my son. And he's just as gentle with the 8-year-olds as he is with the 80-year-olds, but he can still have a beer with his 20-some-year-old friends. That is what I wanted to see. I didn't want him to be like me, withdrawn and mousy and ashamed and afraid and all this stuff. He's living his life loudly and he's a good, decent human being. And that's all any of us can hope for.
And, to kind of tie this all together in a nice, pretty bow, I think that you are the opposite of mousy and withdrawn. And I know maybe that is how you felt and that was your identity earlier on, but I didn't know you then, but clearly you've made a 180.
I'm back.
Yes. And so it's like, the mothering really never ends. So he's still experiencing you as a mother, right? You're still
100%. He has his own house, but you know what? There are nights he'll call me and say, "Did you cook dinner?" And even if I didn't, I'm like, "Honey, just come over." And he's still every Saturday, and I get a lot of heck for this, but he brings me his laundry because I know how to get the grease stains out and all. I mean, his girlfriend's a sweetheart, but mom knows how to do the laundry, and I love doing it for him. I still want him to need me no matter how old he is. So I'll do his laundry and we visit and we celebrate everything together. So yeah, I think that it just gets better. And I'm so glad that we have that. Now, how it is with his dad, that's again between them. I don't ask, he doesn't tell. We respect that about each other because like I said from the beginning, his relationship with me and mine with him is between us and it's beautiful. And I'm so grateful because he's my only one. I don't have another one if it didn't work out.
Yes. Man, well, you are an amazing woman. And so let's end this by talking about, you said you have this amazing book and you are also working on some new books. So can you tell us about those?
Yes. So the book, unfortunately, so many people could relate to it. It dealt with my previous marriage to a narcissist. So everybody was like, well, you must have been, like what happened? You must have been experiencing this as a child, or what did your childhood look like? There was this big question mark. So yes, I wrote the prequel, which as a matter of fact, I'm just finishing up. By the end of this week, I should actually have it back to the publisher, and within a few months, we will have it out. But it deals with, the growing up, being born to a mother who didn't want me. I was a teenage pregnancy and all the various abuses I experienced in that house and just the raw emotional, warfare with myself and with them of struggling to know if I belonged or if I should even exist. And, then how it kind of impacted even in high school. I was attached, like I would cling to people and I would feel abandonment and rejection. There's so much to it. So anybody that's interested in that, like child psychology stuff, that's what that's about. And then I also have the sequel coming out later this year, the sequel to Gasping for Air, which talks more about like the last few years, what happened after that divorce, the aftermath, some of this parenting stuff still, because, regardless of going no contact and having a restraining order against him for trying to kill me, yeah, we still had contact. And so there was that stuff. And there was, me never thinking I wanted to ever be in a relationship again. And then having this longtime friend come forward and say, but what about us? And I'm like, oh, crap. So, but it's lovely. But, healing and going into this romantic situation while still having a foot in the past. And then, believe it or not, another narcissist who was a friend of mine for 16 years comes out of nowhere and reveals her. So that's actually a pretty juicy story there.
Sounds good.
There's a lot. Yeah, I know. And I don't know how to react when people tell me that Gasping for Air is such a page turner, but that seems to be the common remark about it. I'm like, thanks, because I lived it and it wasn't so much fun. But I'm glad for, anybody that's even just looking for a toxic relationship read, for the beach or for their vacation. It's there. And, hopefully people can learn something from it as well.
Yes. Well, I guess we all owe you some thanks for being so forthcoming, so open and honest about your life and your pain and your struggles, because that's really how we help people, is if we can share that those deep, painful things. So I really appreciate you. Any last words for the audience before we wrap up?
I always tell people this: follow your gut. Especially as moms, I only had one. I didn't know what the hell I was doing because I didn't exactly have a good role model of one to model after. Mm-hmm. But just follow your gut. Every person is different. We're different. We all come from different life perspectives and experiences, but follow your gut. If you listen to it, it usually will lead you in the right direction.
That's perfect. Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Positively Healthy Mom podcast, because there's no manual for the hardest job in the world. Don't forget to subscribe and share with your friends.